Have you ever imagined that a luxurious boarding school in Switzerland, home to the ultra-wealthy and the top-tier students, could also be the breeding ground for one of the most ruthless and unjust systems imaginable? I used to think I was lucky. Lucky to escape a toxic family. Lucky to be sent abroad for a better future. But the truth is, everything only truly began the moment I met Randy, a scholarship student with a kind heart who quickly became the target of the school's darkest bullying. From the moment he was nearly branded with a heated school emblem to a months-long battle for justice, this isn't just a story of personal revenge. It's a story about standing up against a rotting system, a system where money and privilege always seem to matter more than the truth. If you've ever been bullied, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, or if you just want to hear about a rebellion no one saw coming, then listen to my story. This is true Reddit stories where even the most powerful eventually have to bow to justice. Chapter 1. The Day. My family disowned me and my new life at an aristocratic boarding school. I remember very clearly the day my parents decided to disown me. I know it sounds like a tragedy, but to be honest, it was the happiest day of my life, because just a few days later they packed all my belongings, shoved me onto a flight halfway across the world, and sent me straight to a prestigious boarding school in Switzerland. They called it a life-changing opportunity. I saw it as a one-way ticket out of a hellish home where beatings, cruel words, and icy silence were served up daily like breakfast. And to be fair, I had nothing to lose. By the age of 13, I had already learned to endure in silence to survive without expecting anything from anyone but myself. So when I stepped onto the campus of that new school, surrounded by blue-eyed, blonde-haired students who looked like they walked straight out of a Swiss watch commercial, I didn't feel afraid. I just felt misplaced. I still remember my first day sitting alone in the massive dining hall, quietly chewing on a piece of bread, while no one even glanced in my direction. Here, everyone dressed in designer clothes and spoke with a kind of effortless confidence, like the world itself was just their personal playground. And me, a scholarship student from a country they couldn't even pronounce correctly. Those first few days felt unbearably heavy. I tried to blend in, to smile, to pretend I enjoyed the expensive hobbies of rich kids, weekend horseback riding, winter skiing holidays, glamorous parties in lakeside villas overlooking Geneva. But the feeling that I didn't belong here clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. Sometimes I wondered if I could really start over in this place, or was I just trading one kind of hell for another, where loneliness was wrapped in gold and velvet? Either way, I told myself, even if the whole world turns its back on me, I will survive. Because if I could make it out of my old house alive, nothing here could possibly break me. But I was wrong. So very wrong. And I had no idea that life at this boarding school would become even more complicated and far darker than anything I had ever faced before. Chapter 2. The Outsider and the Unspoken Rules. The first 3 months passed painfully slowly. I thought I would forever be the lone outsider at this school until I met Randy. Randy showed up on an early winter evening when the wind from the lake brought with it a biting cold. He stood out among the polished students with his worn-out backpack, self-cut, uneven hair, and a school uniform faded from too many washes. When Randy walked into the dining hall, the entire room seemed to freeze for a second, every gaze fixed on him filled with curiosity, judgment, and thinly veiled contempt. I was about to smile and invite him to sit with me, but before I could open my mouth, Jake, my roommate, grabbed my arm and whispered, "Don't." The last scholarship kid like him got expelled for stealing Rolexes and laptops. I wanted to argue, to say that I knew exactly what that kind of isolation felt like, but then I remembered those lonely dinners during my first month. In this place, if you wanted to survive, you had to choose your side. So I said nothing. I just watched Randy quietly search for an empty corner, and a faint, uneasy shame crept over me. The days that followed brought scenes I still can't erase from memory. Randy was treated like a stain on the school's perfect painting. He was the only one made to go through a metal detector every morning. The rich kids would accidentally spill water on his shirt and laugh as he scrambled to clean it up. But what shocked me most, Randy never fought back. He just smiled patiently. Once his mother sent him a box of homemade cookies. I thought he'd keep them to himself. Instead, Randy offered them to everyone, including the kids who had mocked him moments earlier. Another time he found a $50 bill in a crowded hallway. Instead of pocketing it, he stood right in the middle of the lobby and called out, "Did anyone drop this?" I looked at him and wondered, how could someone treated so cruelly still choose to be kind? I was grateful for Randy's presence, because through him, I realized something important at this school. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't wealth or privilege. It's the unspoken rules, the way injustice is allowed to thrive just because we're all too scared of becoming the next target. But things didn't truly spiral out of control until something called Legacy Week, the school's traditional celebration for those born into the bloodline. Chapter 3, Legacy Week, when power takes the throne. If you've never heard of Legacy Week, imagine a full week where kids whose parents once attended the school are given the unspoken right to dominate, bully, or challenge anyone without a legacy, all under the school's excuse of preserving tradition. To me, it felt like a glorified hunt, except the prey couldn't fight back for fear of being completely ostracized. I had planned to lay low for the entire week. The library became my safest hiding place, and I stayed there as late as possible each night. But one evening, as I was walking back to the dorms from the library, 3 legacy kids blocked me at the basement stairwell. Preston, the ringleader and by far the most powerful of all the privileged students, stepped out from the shadows holding a large metal badge engraved with the school's crest. Before I could process what was happening, the other 2 had already grabbed both of my arms. Preston lit his lighter, holding the flame against the badge until it glowed a fierce, angry orange. "If you want to survive here, you need to know your place," Preston said, eyes locked on mine, unblinking as if trying to burn through me. I froze in terror. My body stiffened, and I couldn't think of anything except the heat that was seconds away from branding my skin. Just a few more moments, and that badge would be scorched into me, a punishment, or worse, a permanent mark of servitude. But suddenly the fire alarm blared through the halls, a piercing, deafening shriek, followed by a downpour from the overhead sprinklers. The group panicked and scattered. I turned and saw Randy at the end of the hallway, his hand still on the fire alarm lever. He had saved me no need for thanks, just a sharp nod telling me to run. We fled into the chaotic crowd of students rushing outside, soaked to the bone but safe. That night, for the first time, I felt truly grateful to have Randy by my side. But just when I thought it was over, the school summoned us to the headmaster's office the next morning. I thought to myself, this time Preston's going to pay. But things didn't go the way I imagined. The headmaster didn't look at me even once. He focused solely on Randy, accusing him of property damage, of disrupting tradition, and claimed that he simply wasn't the kind of student who belonged here. "One more mistake, and you're out," the headmaster said, coldly, ignoring every word I tried to say. To explain what had actually happened, I watched Randy walk out of that office, his shoulders heavy, eyes distant, like someone who had just been handed a sentence he could never appeal. And that's when it hit me, in this school, sometimes justice had no place, especially if you were never meant to belong here in the first place. Chapter 4, Randy's Breaking Point. After that fire alarm incident, I thought things might finally settle down. But at this school, the powerful never let the powerless rest. Preston and his crew strutted around even more smugly, like Randy being threatened with expulsion was some kind of glorious victory. It all started the next morning when a swarm of students rushed out into the dorm hallway. At first, I thought there was another fire. But no, the crowd was heading straight to Randy's room. What I saw made my chest tighten. Randy stood in a corner, his face frozen, trying hard to look indifferent, as 2 security guards tore through his belongings. "We found marijuana in your desk," one of them declared. The news spread across campus within minutes. No investigation, no questions, no one came to his defense. By lunchtime, the decision was made expulsion. Randy was labeled a criminal. I searched for him afterward. I finally found him behind the dorms near the back parking lot, stuffing his things into an old trash bag. His face was soaked with tears. Randy, who had always been so composed, so patient, had finally broken. I sat down beside him, completely lost for words. Sometimes comfort is useless when the pain is already too heavy to carry. After a while, Randy spoke first. He pulled a worn photo out of his wallet, a man in a white coat, standing in front of a hospital. Randy's father, once a doctor in Syria. Randy told me he came to Switzerland on scholarship, hoping to earn a future not for himself, but for his little sister, who had leukemia. If I can't pay for her treatment here, she won't survive. Randy choked out. But what enraged me most was what he said next. Preston knew everything. And just before Randy was expelled, Preston had leaned in and whispered, "Your sister's going to die no matter how hard you try." That level of cruelty. It was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. I stood in silence as the taxi pulled away, taking Randy with it. His eyes were full of tears pressed against the back window. Inside me, a rage boiled, wordless, bitter, and sharp. For months afterward, I wished someone would rise up against Preston, until I realized that someone had to be me. I pulled out my phone and sent Preston a single message. "You destroyed an innocent person. I won't let it end like this." Seconds later, he replied with a string of laughing emojis. Each symbol sliced into my pride like a blade, but strangely, they also gave me something else: fuel, for everything I was about to do next. Chapter 5: The Power Network and the Wall of Silence. After Randy's expulsion, it felt like I was living in a shattered world. On one hand, I was suffocating with rage. On the other, I came to a terrifying realization. Preston wasn't just a bully. He was the school's underground king, with a power network so vast that no one dared speak up. The next morning, I forced myself to walk calmly into the dining hall. Preston sat at the central table, as always surrounded by his loyal crew, laughing and chatting like nothing had ever happened. I took a seat nearby, pretending to bury my face in a book, but really, I had my phone recording, hoping to catch something incriminating. And as expected, Preston didn't hold back. He spoke loudly about those charity cases who don't know their place, mocked scholarship leeches, and laughed with pride as he bragged about cleaning up the trash from the school. Everyone knew who he was talking about, but no one dared to challenge him, not even the teachers who were right there in the room. Back in my dorm, I replayed the recording over and over. Then I began compiling everything I had: text, photos, testimonies from students who had been bullied by Preston but never dared speak out. That's when Jake, my roommate, pulled me aside and whispered, "What are you trying to do? Preston could ruin your life. His dad owns real estate banks. You have no idea who you're messing with." But hearing that only made me more determined. That night, I snuck into the shared computer room and started compiling everything into a formal report. I sent the evidence to the school board and to Randy's family. My hands were trembling as I hit send, but for the first time, a piece of that burning rage inside me felt released. Then reality hit hard. By the next morning, my inbox had been locked, accused of violating the school's technology policies. All of my recordings and documents in the cloud were wiped. Someone had moved swiftly and silently to erase everything I had built. Jake looked at me with pity in his eyes. "I warned you, around here money decides everything." But I didn't back down. Being pushed to the edge only made me more resolute, because I knew if I stayed silent today, more Randys would be destroyed, tomorrow erased from this school, simply for not fitting the mold that Preston and his elite circle had defined. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. Somewhere in the shadows, others had been watching quietly, cautiously. And soon, I would find out. Some of them were ready to step out and help when I needed it most. Chapter 6: Unexpected Allies and a Quiet Rebellion. After days of feeling like every path had closed, A faint glimmer of hope came from the last place I ever expected, the library. The school library had always been neutral ground, a place where conflict was temporarily left behind those heavy wooden doors. And it was there that I met Sarah. Sarah was an upperclassman, the daughter of a well-known diplomat. She was quiet, sharp, and most importantly, completely uninterested in the school's toxic political games. One afternoon, she quietly sat down across from me, leaned in, and whispered, "I know what Preston's been doing, and I want to help." Her words stunned me. For the first time, I felt someone was truly standing beside me. Sarah handed me a USB drive. This has recordings, screenshots of messages between Preston, Marcus, and Astrid, and a few shady emails I snapped while interning in the admin office. I've been following this for a while, but if you're going to take Preston down, you'll need more than just evidence, you'll need strong allies. I was floored by how much she had gathered in secret. It wasn't just me and Randy. Through those files, Sarah had uncovered an entire list of victims. Most were scholarship students or anyone who had dared to publicly defy Preston. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. Preston's power wasn't as unshakable as it looked. His influence thrived on fear and the collective assumption that no one could ever touch him. But once that illusion started to crack, once the truth began leaking, his empire would slowly unravel. Still, Preston didn't just sit back. The retaliation began quickly. Someone accidentally spilled coffee on my laptop during lunch. I started finding anonymous threats slipped under my door. My student email access was suspended for disrupting residential order. Jake, my roommate, was forced to switch dorms after his parents were allegedly threatened with visa renewal issues tied to their business in Switzerland. I moved like a ghost in my own school. I quickly walked the halls in silence, avoided conversations to protect anyone from being dragged down with me. The isolation was suffocating, the fear paralyzing. But Sarah never wavered. "We can't take down a rotting system with emotion alone," she told me one night. "We need strategy, solid proof, and a moment where everyone's ready to stand up at once." It was her calm, relentless focus that rekindled something in me, a belief that no matter how powerful Preston seemed, there would come a day when everything he built on fear and silence would collapse. And when that day came, I would no longer bow our heads. That was the moment I made my choice. I wouldn't just survive. I would be the one to start something that couldn't be buried. Chapter 7: Truth Unveiled and the Quiet Rebellion. As I began gathering new allies, things slowly started to shift, gradually but undeniably. Sarah remained the leader of our cause, but the real game changer came from the most unexpected place. Marcus, Preston's longtime friend, stepped into the light. One late afternoon, Marcus found me behind the school grounds, eyes a mix of worry and resolve. "I don't want to stay silent anymore," he said. "I watched Preston push Randy to the edge, and now he's doing the same to you. If this keeps going, more people will be destroyed." Marcus revealed that Preston had once assigned him to keep an eye on me, but the more he did, the more he realized he was just another pawn in Preston's game. He gave me secret messages from their inner group, evidence of how Preston schemed to frame people, manipulate events, and even spark scandals just to eliminate students he deemed unfit. From that point, we began holding quiet meetings with Sarah, Emma, a former classmate who had also been indirectly used by Preston, and even Mr. Petrov, the elderly Russian janitor, who had seen Preston sneak into Randy's room the night of the alleged incident. Each person brought a different piece to the puzzle. Slowly, we pieced together a full picture of Preston's influence. Network students, teachers, cafeteria staff, dorm managers, nearly everyone had at some point been pressured, threatened, or bribed by Preston or his father. Sarah mapped out the strategy. Emma organized audio recordings. Marcus dug through records of past scholarship students who had mysteriously been forced out. I contacted those former students through social media. Many were still haunted, but some were willing to share their stories via email or even video calls. Some nights we gathered in Sarah's room, one dim light, a laptop glowing at the center of the table files, voice memos and message threads stacking up like a criminal investigation. And in one of those nights, it hit me, Preston wasn't untouchable. His power came from fear, but all it took was a handful of people speaking the truth to make him vulnerable. We decided against a dramatic takedown, no single knockout blow. Instead, we would peel back his mask layer by layer, with evidence, with witnesses, and with precision. The goal was to protect ourselves while building undeniable pressure on the administration and board, forcing them to face the truth they had long ignored. The fear still lingered. I kept receiving anonymous threats and vague warnings about consequences. But for the first time, I wasn't alone, and that gave me the strength to keep moving forward. We had sparked a quiet flame of resistance. No one in the school knew it yet, but a silent uprising had begun. And I truly believe sometimes even the smallest ember can burn down a rotten system if people are brave enough to stand together. Chapter 8. The Counterattack. When Power Begins to Crumble. The following days felt like a war of wits. No one except those of us in the group had any idea that behind the polished hallways of this elite school, a quiet plan to expose Preston was growing stronger by the hour. Sarah, with her sharp mind and fearless leadership, was the first to light the fuse publicly. During a student council meeting attended by teachers, parents, and students, she stood up and asked, "Why are scholarship students so often expelled without thorough investigations? Why does the school allow false accusations to go unpunished?" The room fell into stunned silence. Preston's face drained of all color. Almost immediately, anonymous threats started rolling into Sarah's inbox, but this time, she didn't back down. She created a secret group chat, sharing files, recordings, and damning emails we'd collected. She also contacted a progressive teacher, someone who had once been indirectly victimized by Preston's influence. Emma, now fully outside of Preston's control, quietly gathered more evidence: chat logs, emails from isolated students, even voice recordings of Preston threatening her. Marcus approached a few members of the lacrosse team, planting seeds of doubt about the toxic traditions Preston worked so hard to protect. As for me, I focused on the neutral teachers. I asked pointed questions, discreetly sent anonymous emails warning of systemic misconduct. To my surprise, some teachers started paying attention. They had long suspected something was off, how talented students kept mysteriously disappearing from the school. But what no one expected was this: those deemed the weakest became the strongest force. Petrov the janitor. Preston, once mocked, delivered the final piece. A mini surveillance camera he had installed for unrelated reasons had accidentally captured Preston and Marcus sneaking into Randy's room the night before he was framed. We all knew one misstep could get us wiped out of the school overnight, but fear was slowly replaced by resolve. Week after week, our network expanded. Students who had once stayed silent began reaching out, some anonymously, some bravely, to share their stories. The belief that truth could win was growing. The turning point came when a group of parents whose children were scholarship students filed an official complaint with the school board demanding an investigation into suspicious expulsions and full transparency into 3 years of disciplinary records. For the first time in school history, the administration couldn't simply ignore voices from outside their inner circle. I knew Preston was losing control. His eyes, once full of smug certainty, now flickered with anxiety. We weren't just fighting a boy, we were pushing back against an entire system built on silence, intimidation, and buried truths. But we had shifted the wind. Once truth is lit, darkness is no longer a safe place for the wicked. And for the first time, I truly believed when enough people are willing to stand up, even the most rotten system can be burned to the ground. Chapter 9. The Collapse of Power. When Truth Speaks. This chapter marked the most decisive turning point in the story, the moment when every shred of evidence, every ounce of effort, and every act of courage from our group finally began to bear fruit. If before Preston carried out his dirty tactics with smug confidence now, he resembled a cornered animal, frantic and exposed. In the final days leading up to the school board hearing, I lived in a strange state of fear and hope. Threatening emails and anonymous messages flooded our inboxes. Me, Sarah, and Emma all received them. Marcus even got a message warning that the police might be tipped off about his undocumented immigrant family. But strangely enough, no one backed down. Instead, we pulled closer. The night before the evidence was to be revealed, we stayed up together in Sarah's room. Over 100 pages of documents, emails, recordings, video clips, and witness statements painstakingly compiled into a detailed, logical, and undeniable report. Sarah had spent the past week editing every line, even consulting with a lawyer through one of her family's contacts in the embassy. That morning, I walked into the boardroom not as the scared, abandoned kid I once was, but with a strange calm. I knew I was speaking on behalf of everyone who had ever been stepped on, silenced, or humiliated in the name of tradition. The meeting opened under tense silence. School board members, administrators, and parent representatives filled the room. Preston and his father arrived, late faces composed, but the fear was visible in their eyes. When the evidence presentation began, you could hear a pin drop. Video clips showed Preston ordering Marcus to frame other students. Audio recordings revealed the manipulation, coercion, and threats orchestrated by his circle. There was even a confession from Astrid recorded and time-stamped. I'll never forget that moment. Preston's face went pale. He stammered, trying to defend himself. His father attempted to threaten a countersuit for defamation, but the school board's legal counsel calmly confirmed the legitimacy of our evidence. The mask shattered. But what touched me most wasn't seeing Preston crumble. It was hearing from students who had once been silenced. Former scholarship kids, those who'd been quietly expelled or forced out, started sending messages of support. Some even agreed to testify via video call. And then Randy appeared live on the screen, calling in from Syria. When I saw him smile through the webcam, I knew that everything we fought for had been worth it. The school board's ruling was swift and historic. Preston was permanently expelled. Disciplinary records for past victims were cleared. The school's entire disciplinary system would be overhauled. Complicit staff were either reassigned or dismissed, and a new scholarship fund, the Randy Foundation, was established for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, especially those affected by bullying. As I watched Preston walk out of the school, in silence, no applause, no goodbyes, just cold stares, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt the weight of 1,000 bricks lifted off my shoulders. That evening, our group, Sarah, Marcus, Emma, Mr. Petrov, sat quietly together in the common room. No words, just tired smiles, puffy eyes, and a deep, quiet knowing. We did it. This victory wasn't just ours. It was for every student who'd ever been overlooked, for every kid who'd ever been pushed aside because they didn't belong, for every voice that had once been silenced. That day, power was defeated not by force, but by unity, conscience, and most of all, by the truth. Chapter 10. The Ending. Justice. Healing, and a new beginning. This final chapter is something I once thought I'd never get to write a happy ending. Not perfect, not without scars, but truly earned after everything we had been through. After that school board meeting, the atmosphere on campus changed. The whispers, the suspicious glances, the quiet tension slowly gave way to openness, understanding, and even warmth. Our group, once seen as outsiders, had become a symbol of change, not because we were special, but because we dared to speak up. Randy was welcomed back to school with the respect he had always deserved. His reinstatement ceremony was modest, but deeply moving. When he stood at the podium, he didn't blame anyone. He didn't lash out. He simply thanked those who had fought for truth and justice. The entire hall fell silent as he spoke of his dream to become a doctor, about his family back in Syria, and why he had always chosen kindness, even when the world was cruel to him. As for me, for the first time in years, I felt like I truly belonged. I was elected student council president, not because of grades or popularity, but because people believed I would protect every student's rights, especially those who had once felt powerless. Sarah, Marcus, Emma. Each of us stepped into new chapters, stronger, wiser, proud that we hadn't stayed silent. Preston's family quietly withdrew from all school activities. His parents pulled their donations, but no one really cared anymore. Preston left without a word, no farewell, no supporters to shield him from the consequences he had created. That wasn't revenge. That was justice finally having a voice. Complicit staff members, teachers, and administrators who had looked the other way were either reassigned or resigned. Those who remained began to change actively, joining anti-bullying programs and offering support to students in need. And me. Every morning I walked through the school halls, I no longer felt like I had to hide or perform. I saw new students of every background, every shade of skin, every story, and I knew that from now on they'd have a fair chance. Their voices would be heard. The final event before graduation was a tree planting ceremony in the courtyard, a small maple sapling symbolizing new beginnings, resilience, and the strength to grow beyond adversity. We planted it together laughing, capturing the moment as a quiet promise to always stand for truth and justice. When I received my diploma, I turned to look at Randy, Sarah, Marcus, and Emma, and in that moment, I realized something. We were no longer victims. We were the ones who dared to rewrite our story and the story of this school. On the final night before we said our goodbyes, I sat next to Randy under the stars on the quiet lawn where it had all begun. He said something I'll never forget. Thank you for fighting even when I couldn't fight for myself. I smiled, replying softly, You saved me too from the moment you pulled that fire alarm. Maybe the greatest strength isn't in defeating the bad, but in building something better after the damage is done. I believe that even if the world still has many Prestons out there, there will be more people ready to rise, to speak, and to stand with one another. No one will have to fight alone again. We ended this story with gratitude, with pride, and most of all, with hope. Hope that the future can be fairer, that cruelty in disguise no longer has a place, and that no matter where life takes me, I will never forget the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes it only takes one person to stand up to injustice, and the whole system begins to change. After everything that happened, I finally understood something. Justice isn't always about watching the bad guys crumble in a courtroom. Sometimes justice is simply this: when we are no longer afraid, when we dare to stand up, when we dare to protect the vulnerable, and when we dare to become a voice for the truth. Randy, Sarah, Marcus, Emma, and I, we all walked away from that school carrying scars that will never fully fade. But we also carried a pride that no one could ever take away. We turned pain into strength. We turned injustice into the drive to change. And we transformed a school that once seemed untouchable into a place where every student was respected. If you're listening to this and you feel even the faintest spark of hope, a longing to fight for justice, remember this: you are not alone. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to fight, because all it takes is one person to begin, and others will always find the courage to follow. Thank you for listening until the very end. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next true Reddit stories where justice always finds its voice.